Well, it is so good to be back from vacation. As always, it's always wonderful to go away and just have a change of scene and four walls and see something of our beautiful state. But it's always just so great to come back home, your own bed, familiar faces, and being back with you. The only problem is that after 2.5 weeks of wearing nothing but sandals, I feel my feet I'm not really happy wearing my black dress shoes this morning. But anyway, that's a small thing. They'll get used to it. Our gospel reading today, I'm going to think about our gospel reading today. Reading it, I couldn't help but feel that Jesus really liked pressing people's buttons. Or if it wasn't so much liked, he just felt compelled to do it. It was part of his mission to draw people out, to ask the uncomfortable questions that no one else dared to ask. Today, it's all set around the meal table. And those of you who know anything about meal arrangements in the ancient world will know that the seating where people sat was extremely important. If you have ever worried about, if you've had friends over for dinner, maybe you've worried about, who should I put next to who and how would it all work? Was nothing compared with what hosts had to think about in the ancient world, because where you sat was dictated by how important you were, what status you had, how wealthy you were, how well you connected you were, how powerful you were. And so our Pharisee today would have spent some time and thought and effort over where should people sit. In those days, at the sort of dinners we're talking about, people would sit in a U shape, either sit or perhaps recline if they were Hellenized, Greek and Roman tradition. The host would sit at the base of the U, and then the most important person, the most important guest, would sit on the host's right. The second most important person would sit on the host's left, and then so on and so forth down the U until the least important people would sit at the very top of the U. Of course, they couldn't be that unimportant because they got an invitation in the first place. So they weren't too shabby, but you see how it goes. So he was Jesus, and it's interesting in the gospel, we're not told where Jesus sat. I really want to know. I kind of really want to know. But anyway, Jesus, some way through the meal, and here he decides to press the buttons, starts to tell a story about a wedding banquet and how, if you're invited to a wedding banquet, don't go and sit in one of the most important places. Go and sit at the least important place. Now, you can tell that Jesus is not an Episcopalian, because had he been raised in a good Episcopal household, he would have known that you never discuss sex, religion, or politics at the dinner table, and you do not offend your host or any of the other guests. But Jesus can't help himself. He is the Son of God after all, so I guess we need to give him some allowance. But the story, the little vignette about the wedding banquet, of course, was meant to, I don't think really embarrass, but it was meant to get the host and the other guests thinking. About what? About what? Well, at first glance, the story may seem rather straightforward about, just a moral tale about virtue and humility. Don't think more highly of yourself than you should. Remember your place. Be humble, and because that's the way of righteousness. So when you go to a fancy dinner, sit at the lowest place. And then, if that turns out to be your place, then all well and good. If the host wants you to sit in a more prominent place, then you'll receive kudos for being invited to sit up higher. Of course, it might also be some advice about saving face, because of course saving face was extremely important in that culture. The last thing you wanted to do was be embarrassed in front of guests. And so yes, don't sit in the most important place or in an important place, because if that turns out to be the place of someone else, then you're going to feel rather foolish being asked by the host to sit in a lower place. Yes, Jesus' little story is about those things, but I think it's about something much more important, much deeper than just sort of social niceties, saving face, and even about humility, which is important. Although thinking about humility reminds me, and I don't know why, this story always reminds me of this. Years and years ago, when I was younger and more foolish than I am today, which isn't much, but because I'm still foolish. But anyway, I went with friends to a Chinese restaurant, and we were sitting there, and the wait person came and said at some point to everybody, would you like chopsticks or would you like a knife and fork? Well, everybody else, all my other friends said, oh yes, chopsticks please. I'd never used chopsticks. But of course, not wanting to stand out or feel embarrassed, I said, yeah, I'll have chopsticks too. They came, the meal came, and of course everybody was eating away happily, and I was trying to, how do you eat rice with a chopstick, for heaven's sake? I mean, anyway, and at some point, so what I could have done was one of two things, of course. One, I could have asked for a knife and fork in the first place, and not worried about what other people thought, or I could have swallowed some of my pride and asked somebody how to use chopsticks, but I didn't do any of that. And at some point I managed to catch our wait person's eye and just sort of mouthed, because by that time I was kind of hungry, and I could see the clock stickers and all the other things kind of going, and I was going to miss out. But anyway, so humility is an important thing. It is an important thing to know who we are in God's sight. But as I said, to me, I think the story is about more than just social niceties, or indeed about humility, important though that is. What was Jesus' mission all about in total? It was about, if you want to use Old Testament language, it was about revealing the glory of God, which means revealing the mind of God, showing the face of God, letting people know what God's dream was and is, what it is to be a human being, how we are to live, and what the meaning and purpose of our lives is. And so the story is really about that, isn't it? How so? Well, think back to the Genesis story. We've thought about this a lot over the years. We're all created in God's image, male and female, which means we're all equal in God's sight, yes? All equally beloved, all equally deserving of respect and dignity. All of us have the imprint of our Maker within us and upon us. And yet, in Jesus' time and still today, don't we make distinctions? Don't we have hierarchies, pecking orders, whatever you might call them, due to wealth, due to status, due to being successful in a particular career, being well connected? All those things. We create hierarchies. Well, this so-and-so is a very important person because yada, 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 or they have a lot of money, so we have to treat them with, deference, respect, or, so-and-so knows so-and-so, and they're really, so yes, we need to, we do it all the time. And in Jesus' day, it was no different. And Jesus, I think, must have at some point looked around the table and thought, here, look, even the seating arrangement, even the way we sit down at dinner is kind of symbolizes this whole hierarchical structure, this whole, I'm better than you are, or I'm lower than you are, and how does this reflect God's plan? How is this part of God's dream? It's not. So even the way we sit, even something simple, like the way we sit at a meal table, reflects how we've kind of forgotten who we are and what we are. As I said, I've been away on vacation, and so I've spent some time in restaurants and going to touristy places where, people have served us. And, most of the people that I've observed, because I'm kind of a people watcher, I hope not in a creepy way, but I just love watching people. I love seeing how people interact as groups and families, what people are wearing, what they're doing, how they're looking. I know, anyway. So in restaurants and other places, it's just fascinating to see how other people react with people who serve them, right? And most people, I have to say, are kind and polite and thoughtful, but some people are just really rude with the wait staff, or, the park ranger, or, the young person who's serving, in a store. Some people are so demanding. I'm the customer, therefore I must be right. I've got the money, so you need to do, what I tell you to do. No. No, the person is just trying to do a job. A good friend of ours, she grew up in actually very humble circumstances, but married into money, and her children, her 4 children, all therefore have been children of privilege. They're all grown up now, but when they were teenagers and going to college, she insisted all of them had a job as a wait person, because she wanted them to know what it was like to be on the other side, to be the servant, to take the orders. We create in our minds and in society these hierarchies that separate us from each other, that create these distinctions between us. And in doing that, we can lose our humanity, both those who are served and those who serve. But we're really all equal. And isn't that what Jesus is trying to remind the Pharisee and his guests? Yes, you're wealthy. Yes, you are well connected. Yes, you have all the best seats in the synagogues and that sort of thing. But you are really no different. God does not love you any more than he loves the poor folks who live in the hovel down the street, who scratch out their living on a small plot of land. God loves you no more, but no less than they. How do we live this out in our own lives? Well, when we go out of this place, we will be back in the world of pecking orders, hierarchies, status. I mean, it's all around us. We can't ignore it. And we're part of it. How do we live as Christians? How do we live with this vision of God's equality? How do we live that in our world? Well, that's partly for you to figure out. Good luck. Good luck. And even if you get compromised, it's okay. God will give you a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth and fifth. He has me. Thank God. But even if you stumble, even if you fall, don't forget the vision. We are all equal in God's sight. It seems such a simple thing, doesn't it? It seems so, of course we are. But the way our world interacts and the way the world forces people to interact with each other is far from obvious. Race, colour, creed, money, career. You and I are called, like Jesus, to witness to the bigger picture, to the real truth. So you have permission, and I'll finish with this. You have permission to be very un-Episcopalian, to maybe ask the awkward questions, to maybe press some buttons, and not conform, to ask, and to witness to the truth. Amen.